and welcome to another session of Informally Formal. I'm back again with one of my favorites, Mr. Abul Kasem Khan. He was a three-time president of Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry, veteran of the business landscape in Bangladesh, current chairman of Build, and the managing director of AK Khan Telecom. A very warm welcome to you, Abul Kasem.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, always a pleasure. Abul Kasem, will go right into it. My previous session with you was introducing Rcep and Bangladesh's intent to join this tremendous trade bloc that just got formed a few months back. As you had mentioned, would be a game changer for Bangladesh. Our today's session would be a continuation of our previous session, but here what I would like for you, for our audiences, help us understand what Bangladesh needs to do in its preparation for joining RCEP. Over to you, Abul Kasem.
To answer your question, I would just go into some of the areas that Bangladesh needs to do in the short term to mid-term. If you see the World Bank Logistic Index, we are at the bottom of the ranking. Whereas if you compare other countries within the membership of the Rcep, a lot of countries are ranked higher than us. So in terms of our efficiency, competitiveness, we have to improve our competitiveness. And one of the areas that many reports have indicated that the logistic index or the logistic connectivity, if you add connectivity, the port facilities, the road connectivity, there are a lot of difficulties faced by exporters and importers. That has to be streamlined. There has to be fast-tracked in many ways, I would say. So your competitiveness is number one if you really want to gain from the Rcep association. And whereas Bangladesh having the 8th largest labor force and the demographic dividend, which is a big advantage for Bangladesh, having 60% of your population below the age of 33, adds a lot of value that gives investors or businesses a long-term vision. So in that respect, our competitiveness is the main area that we need to focus. Second, I would say that the supply side. In order for you to expand your export basket, the industrial diversification is needed. We talk about export diversification, but you need industries to diversify. So within that Rcep membership, there will be a lot of opportunities for Bangladeshi companies to also invest outward to get that technology or the technical know-how. So for example, if a Bangladeshi company within the Rcep group wants to invest in Malaysia to get that factory or that technology, I think that will open up a lot of opportunities for Bangladeshi companies to overnight become regional, which will indirectly help Bangladeshi businesses or trade or investments in different manner. That's how your companies become regional and then global. If you see today, Toyota is a global company, but it belongs to Japan. You talk about Apple, it's a global company. They manufacture products in China and Vietnam, but it's an American company. At the end of the day, America gains from the Apple's sales or revenue or profit through their mechanism of taxation. So Bangladeshi policy planners need to plan that how do we make our companies richer so that we can tax them on their income abroad or dividends abroad that they will incur. So the Rcep will give you that opportunity. So this is second part. So technology transfer through investment outward, technology transfer from joint ventures coming inward into Bangladesh. These are the two areas that I think will open up a lot of opportunities for your small, medium enterprises to grow. Also bring in supply chain.
Let me get back to specific questions, Abul Kasem. What are to Bangladesh? You have mentioned a few. Ease of doing business, logistics you talked about, infrastructure you talked about. What should we do more specifically in preparation?
In terms of Bangladesh, for Rcep members is attractive because they have a larger product portfolio. So they can export their products into Bangladesh. But we have our limitations in export. We all know. We are mostly driven by RMG and we have smaller amounts of other products, negligible. So you need to create a larger export basket for our companies to gain. That is the main limitation that we have. Now, how do you overcome this limitation? That's why I said that we need to think out of the box. Because if you really see the history of RMG, it took 40 years to come to where we are now. You cannot allow another 40 years for another product to develop or evolve. So you need to fast track those product portfolios. Bangladesh government has identified certain products or certain industries that will help our export diversification. But we need to fast track those diversification policies. So you talk about bonded warehouse, you talk about taxation, you could talk about simplification of your tax policies. As I mentioned earlier, that you need to empower your citizens to wealth creation. And that wealth creation in a fast track mode would be to create, one is through joint ventures. So you get the technology into Bangladesh and you facilitate. So you create a better investment climate. So ease of doing business and others come in. The other part is that you manage your supply side. So you create your supply balance with Malaysia, since you are part of the membership. Malaysia is part, or Indonesia, where you have certain advantages of getting those products tax-free. Third, as I already mentioned, that outward investments into those countries to build your supply and product base. So you talk about product diversification. So you have to fast track your product diversification through mergers and acquisition. That is, I think, would fast track a lot of product lines for us. If you talk about product line, we have leather, we have plastic, we have ICT. So these are the promising industries that are evolving very fast.
One of the areas that in many of my programs with Dr. Zaidi Sattar in particular, we talk about export basket diversification, but we haven't been able to do so in so many decades. And the reason for that is our tariff structure. Tariffs are in place to support what is called infant industries. But in Bangladesh's case, as Dr. Zaidi Sattar has written in several articles, we are supporting geriatric industries that we've been supporting for over 30, 40 years with punitive tariff structure. So in order for us to get into any kind of a world market, whether be it individual FTA with a country or regional FTA, our tariff structure needs to be relooked at.
Absolutely. And probably this association would open up the discussions in detail, deep dive into the tariff structure, which is creating the bottlenecks of diversification. I completely agree. But I was in a different webinar and we were discussing the FDI issue. There are a lot of questions. Why do we need FDI? We don't need FDI. We are okay. But that's a wrong theory. You need FDI for not only investment, but employment, technology transfer, skills transfer. So FDI, leapfrog into a different segment, the economic landscape. If you see Vietnam, if you see the other countries who are attracting more FDIs, are gaining more exports into other markets. And the FDIs are creating that export baskets. So I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from other countries. The right timing of policies and the right timing of implementation of the policies and strategies need to be accelerated. As I always mention, there is a window of opportunity. And Bangladesh has that opportunity right now. There is a discussion going on, as I was told, outward investment plan by the government. This government is also realizing that is something that companies want, because we have quite large companies in Bangladesh. I will not name anybody, but there are quite big companies in Bangladesh that can become overnight regional global if they are given that kind of a support. If you see the South Korean model, how did Samsung become Samsung? How did Hyundai become Hyundai? It was pushed by the government in many ways. There has to be certain government support for companies to become global. And you have that structure. Now everything is on the digital platform.
One other thing I would like to pick up on, Abul Kasem, that you said is I'm surprised that there would be people that would argue against FDI, because FDI not only brings in the funds, as you appropriately mentioned, it brings in technological know-how and a transfer of knowledge that takes place with FDI. And talking about Vietnam's model, a bulk of their $280 billion in export comes from FDI-based investment. FDI brings in a lot to the table. So I agree with you 100%. So in conclusion, Abul Kasem, I do understand you've been very clear about the attractiveness of Bangladesh as to why Rcep would look at Bangladesh favorably. But then at the same time, you and I both know that Bangladesh has some homework to do in terms of all the different things that we have to rationalize our tariff system. We have to rationalize the taxation. We have to look into logistics. We have to look into our infrastructure. So, any concluding remarks, Abul Kasem?
Yeah, when we talk about Bangladesh, I personally talk about 5 areas that I say advantage Bangladesh. One is your location. You're sitting in the middle of India and China, and then Rcep is coming in. So Bangladesh is the gateway between India and the Southeast Asia, or say South Asia and Southeast Asia. Very geographically, you are very well situated. 2 is your market advantage. Yourself, we are 350 billion or 320 billion and rising, growing at a rate of 5-6% every year. We were growing at 8+ before the COVID. Disposable income is going up. We are now per capita income higher than India. Very good indicators as a market advantage. Demographic advantage, as I already mentioned. Huge population, young population, dynamic. We need to skill them. But the capacity, it says that Bangladesh has the capacity to grow further because you have a younger population. China had the same advantage in 1979. So there are certain similarities between China. So we are very small in terms of China. And then you have growth advantage. We are growing for the last 30 years, since 1991. Every decade it's growing, adding 1% to its GDP. And lastly, I think we were growing at 8.27 before the COVID hit. And then opportunity advantage. As I mentioned, there are a lot of infrastructure projects that needs your FDI to come in. We are not attracting that. Rcep would give you that advantage also. For the investors to come in, you to grab that investments. So these are the 5 advantages that I think Rcep can gain from Bangladesh.
Very well said, Abul Kasem. I wish we had more time, but we have to wrap it up right here. Can't thank you enough for your time today. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us for this wonderful session. Please stay safe out there. I'll catch you in the next session. Bye-bye.